and welcome. This is OBN Horn of Africa, and today we are gonna discuss Western media pressure on Ethiopia with Mikhail Gamandiy, who is a journalist in Russia. He is also an entrepreneur. Thank you for your time, and thank you for joining us, and welcome to the program, Mr. Gamandiy.
Thank you. Hello, thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very happy to be with you today.
Well, let me start with this question. How do you describe the current political situation in Ethiopia?
I think the political situation in Ethiopia is a normal situation for any sovereign and independent country. And actually, what we are seeing today is that some of the countries and some of the specific medias of some countries are trying to describe the situation in Ethiopia as just a terrible situation. They're just trying to demonize the Ethiopian authorities and the strategic choices that Ethiopia has been doing for the last months and for the last period, including in the defense of its territorial integrity, sovereignty, independence. But once again, I think what the reality is in Ethiopia today and what we are seeing in several Western medias, I think those two pictures and those two realities are very different. This is what I can say about this.
And let me also forward this question. How do you evaluate Western media reporters on Ethiopia?
Yes, well, once again, what we can see is that there is a clear mission for those medias, for those Western medias, to demonize the actions taken by the Ethiopian authorities to restore order in the Tigray region. And of course, there is a clear signs, and I have already saying this for months ago, for a long time, we can see that there is a real mission to destabilize Ethiopia. And to keep this chaos for as long as possible. This is a clear objective from the Western establishment. And when I say Western establishment, it applies for both, for political establishment and for media establishment, because we know very well that in the Western countries, the political establishment and the actions of the political establishment and the actions of the media is strongly connected. And that's what we can see. So once again, we can clearly see that the Western medias participate very actively on the destabilization on the trial of destabilization in Ethiopia, including with the question of the Tigray region, which is basically an internal affairs of Ethiopia. Ethiopia, as an independent sovereign country, has all the right to resolve its security questions by all means, which can any country who has independence and sovereignty, which is the case of Ethiopia. And no one has the right to interfere in those internal affairs. And once again, what the Western media today are doing, that they are interfering, they are participating along with the political establishment in interfering in internal Ethiopian political affairs.
Why do you think Western media houses are totally siding, with the terrorist group, which is TPLF, and fully engaged in misinforming and disinforming the global community?
Yes, well, it's a very good question. I think actually they are not, the way they are trying to manipulate the international opinion is not working so well for them, because they are trying to manipulate Ethiopian public opinion, African public opinion, and international, of course. But actually, I think the only places where this has a little bit of not success, but some results, it's the Western countries. And even in the Western countries, according to my observation, so many people are not following what they are saying. But yes, I think what is very clear today is that these groups like TPLF is why they are supporting it is because we can see it clearly now that they are openly connected to the Western establishment. They are using them as a puppet. I have said this before, but now we have the proof of it, because not long ago, and you know it probably better than me, you saw that TPLF has announced the creation of a so-called opposition coalition, which declare its goals to overthrow the legal, legitimate government of Ethiopia. And from where they do it? From Washington. Can you imagine this? I mean, they are doing it from not only from a foreign country, but they are doing it from a non-African country, and more precisely from Washington. Of course, if they would have done it from some other cities like New York, Miami, or Los Angeles, it will not be so much different. But Washington, as the political capital of the United States, and as the center, the capital of all the main political lobbies of the United States, it clearly confirmed its affiliation with the Western establishment interests. And today we can see, and this confirms their goal to try to punish Ethiopia for its independent decision, for its sovereign policy, because for long they have thought that they will have Ethiopia in their own orbit and in their own control. And today, when they, well, not today, but since they realize that Ethiopia is not a kind of country which will obey to what they will decide on the West, then after that, they start all this campaign against Ethiopia, both in terms of security issues, in terms of political, geopolitical pressure, diplomatical pressure, and also, of course, through their main media who are attacking Ethiopia for being independent. But what I can say is that those people, they have forgot one very important point. Ethiopia is the only country in African history who was never colonized. And I think they don't understand with whom they are dealing, actually. Because today we can see in Africa in general, a lot of people, I think the great majority of people, they are fighting for Pan-African ideas, for Pan-African values, for real freedom and independence and so on. And Ethiopia is a very great example on this, because Ethiopia, once again, is a country who was never colonized, despite different trials during history of colonization. Ethiopia was never colonized by any Western power. And if they think that they will succeed today, despite the fact that they have failed in the past, I mean, they're very wrong on it, and I'm sure they will fail. This is my opinion.
And if you can also say something about misinforming and disinforming the global community, especially that the Western global media are doing in terms of media ethics.
You know, in Western medias, there is no ethics at all for a long time. And this is not only through Ethiopia, we can see it. For long years, we can see that the Western media, who present themselves like being democratical, they pretend to promote free speech and so on. This is just hypocrisy. We have seen it in so many different examples. We have saw it with Syria, we have saw it with Venezuela, with Iran, with Russia, with China, with so many examples in different places of the world. How they are putting information, there is nothing to do with ethics. What they are doing is that they are serving the geopolitical and geo-economical interest of the Western establishment. That's the only goal they are doing. And another example which can confirm what I'm saying now is that look how they were presenting the chief of state of Ethiopia, Abiy Ahmed, some years ago, and how they are presenting him now. Some years ago, when the West was thinking that they can handle Ethiopia, they can have Ethiopia under their control, under their domination, they were presenting those same medias, those Western medias, they were presenting Abiy Ahmed as one of the best African leaders, as an example for all African countries and so on. And look now, those same medias, they are presenting him as the devil, as a terrible person, as a dictator, and all this blah, blah, blah that they are using in general when they want to demonize someone. So when you see this hypocrisy, very open and clear hypocrisy, then you can clearly understand what kind of media they are and why today they are losing trust, not only from international community, from non-Western countries, because I would like to remind that the majority of the world, the extreme majority of the world is non-Western countries. The Western countries themselves, they represent maybe 10% of the world population, which is an extreme minority. But actually, even in the Western countries, so many people today, they are not trusting these Western medias anymore. And if you have following some days ago, I have heard that, for example, a TV channel, propagandist US channel like CNN, for the last year, they have lost 75, almost 75% of their audience. Can you imagine that? That in 1 year, 3/4 of their audience is not anymore following CNN and what they're saying. So this is very, this shows how the West is working, including in the media field. There is nothing to do with the journalists and media ethics when we're talking about them. And the fact that their own people, the Western citizens of those countries, are searching today more and more for alternative information, not for the West information. This is confirming the fact that the West is losing its domination. And today we can say freely and openly that this unipolar world that the West, during which the West has dominated the world affairs, is finished. The West has no right to dominate anyone. The West has to adapt itself to the new era, which is a multipolar era. And in this era, if the West would have a constructive approach, then okay, he can be part of the international community. But if not, then he will just take the place of an extreme minority, because once again, the West is representing an extreme minority of the world. And that's what they have to understand one time for all.
And don't you think that these Western media are fueling the situation in Ethiopia, the conflict situation in Ethiopia today? Because Western media are their conspiracy in creating wrong perception to justify imperialists' penetration into Ethiopia's internal affairs is obvious today. What do you say?
Yes, absolutely. It's very obvious, actually, because what they are doing also, what we need to understand, the Western medias, it's not just an attack against Ethiopia, it's a kind of psychological war. Because when they are trying in the Western media, by the way, not only English speaking, but also French speaking, because I am a French speaking, mainly journalist, and I can see what the French speaking medias are also saying. They are trying to present TPLF as a legitimate actor who is controlling the situation. They are trying to pretend that the army of Ethiopia, the Ethiopian armed force, are in difficulties, and when they put some kind of information, which we know is fake, like TPLF is not so far from the Ethiopian capital, some Western experts, so-called experts, they are saying that at some point TPLF may even take the capital under control. When we see this kind of fake information, this, of course, confirms what you have said. This is just a pure manipulation. And, of course, by doing these psychological attacks, they are trying to make Ethiopian people doubt about the internal situation. And, of course, they want to create troubles, internally speaking, especially as they can see that a large majority of Ethiopian citizens are against this action of destabilization. They can see that there is a large mobilizations of Ethiopian in Addis Ababa and in other areas of Ethiopia. They can see that there is large mobilization in support of the actions of the Ethiopian authorities. And of course, they are trying to make this thing change by manipulating the opinion and by contributing to the conflict to continue. And this is basically, this is something very traditional with them. This is not something new. They were doing it in so many other countries in the world, and they are trying to apply the same scenario for Ethiopia. But once again, I don't think they will succeed, because I think Ethiopia is not a kind of country who will let neocolonial imperialist forces take control of.
And recently, Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta, if you heard this news, appeared on television and said, let me quote, "I stopped watching global media," mentioning Al Jazeera, BBC, CNN, and others. Every single day, Western media cover the negative aspects of Africa. As a result, they contributed to the perception problem towards the continent. Do you share this claim?
Yes, 100%. I share this claim. And actually, what also what create a lot of stress for the Western media today is that they can clearly see that there is now African medias who are getting stronger and stronger. Today, we can see that the African people and people who know Africa well, who want to know Africa well, they are following more and more African TV channels, national channels, regional channels, and also continental Pan-African channels. And of course, this is also a very big challenge for the West, for the Western media, because for a very long time, they were dominating the media sector in Africa. And of course, for them, it was important because more audience they have, more money they make, but also it had a geopolitical interest because more you are controlling the public opinion of any places, of course, it gives you more power and more capacity to control the internal situation. But today, when they see that so many, well, at least more and more African media are becoming strong and popular among the African public opinion, of course, it's a huge challenge for them. And that's why I think what have been said by the president of Kenya is very right about this. The Western media, by deforming the reality on African affairs, they are losing trust from the people who were following it in the past. And actually, it's a huge opportunity also for all the African channels who are promoting today the Pan-African values and the multipolar era of the world affairs.
Global media have their own, agendas in African countries, including BBC, CNN, Al Jazeera, and others. But why do you think they are working against the continent?
Because in their mentality, Africa should be under their rule. They cannot accept a successful and a fully independent sovereign Africa. They want Africa to remain under colonial rule. This has never changed. Today, colonization is finished. Well, for a long time, it's officially finished. But the mentality they had during the colonial time has never changed. The mentality of the Western establishment, of the Western elites, remain unchanged. Especially when we talk about Africa. Actually, they have no respect in general, for non-Western people. That's a fact. They don't respect non-Western countries. The way they see the world is that they have a kind of right to dominate everyone, and Africa, of course, too, because for long they had dominated a large part of Africa, except Ethiopia, by the way. So today, when they see that African nations are building a more and more free, they have a more and more free policy, when today we can clearly see that African nations, several African nations, are trying to develop regional integration, continental integration, Pan-African integration, when the African countries can freely choose their external partners, it can be China, Russia, Turkey, Iran, and other countries. And when they see that, of course, they are really unhappy about it because they want to have the right to decide in the place of the African people. They want to have the possibility to fully control the situation in African affairs, to dictate their agenda to the African nations. And when they are facing leaders, people and countries in Africa who are opposing to this kind of agenda and who say, no, guys, we don't agree with that. We are a free country and we will develop our own internal and external affairs the way we consider it on the best. Of course, this kind of approach is unacceptable for the Western establishment mentality, and that's why they are trying by all the means, all the ways, all the different tools to destabilize the situation within the countries who are taking this Pan-African, sovereign, independent, and pro-multipolar approach.
Do you think
Yes.
USA and other Western global powers media warfare disintegrate Ethiopia like they did in other African and Middle East countries?
I don't think so. They would like to realize such scenarios, that's for sure, but I'm sure people will resist. I'm sure about it. As I said, when we talk about those geopolitical affairs, we also need to refer to history. Ethiopia is a kind of country who was never colonized. And I know Ethiopian people. Ethiopian people will never accept, as they never accepted in the past, they will not accept it today, and they will not accept it in the future, to be under anyone domination, under anyone rule, especially when we're talking about openly neocolonial rule. So yes, they want to disintegrate Ethiopia. They want to create general chaos in Ethiopia, in the internal affairs of Ethiopia. They want to overthrow the government. We can clearly see it now. But knowing the Ethiopian people and knowing the general public opinion today in Ethiopia, I am sure that they will fail. They will fail, and I'm sure that if Ethiopia succeeds by its resistance, I think this will be a very large source of inspiration for other countries, including in Africa. I think Ethiopia has today a very important role, not only talking about Ethiopia. Of course, first of all, for Ethiopia, because when we talk about the country, the first and the main interest is concerning the local affairs and the interest of the local people. But I'm sure that if Ethiopia will continue and will win this war, because this is a war against the Western neocolonial agenda, I'm sure this example will inspire a lot of other African countries to take the same example and to fight against the neocolonial practices of the Western establishment. This is my opinion.
You mentioned neocolonialism in your explanation, and how do you think Africans should fight against the neocolonialism?
I think to fight efficiently the Western neocolonialism, it's very important to be united. Today, we can clearly see that a lot of African people, I would say probably the very large majority of African people from different countries, they want to be united. They want to promote the Pan-African values, especially we know that Africa has a lot of great sons in the past who can inspire them for this. In this, we know so many big African leaders who have fighting Western imperialism and neocolonialism for long. And I think today, including the new generation of Africans, they are very inspired by those people, by those values. And I think the best answer today to fight Western neocolonial practices is to remain united and to make a clear priority of Pan-African integration, of Pan-African values, and of course, by choosing the right allies. I think this is also important, because today, in a multipolar world, it's very important to create right alliances with right partners. The partners who respect your independence, your sovereignty, your dignity, and I think Ethiopia today has the right allies who will support it against the Western interference in its local affairs.
And the Western global powers often prefer, imposing their imperial agenda on African countries. Why do you think this is so?
Once again, because this is a part of their mentality. And today there is another reason which we should not forget. Despite the fact that the Western establishment mentality has never changed, they can speak about democracy, freedom, so-called liberal values and so on, but in fact they are just dictators, and they want to dictate their rules to the whole world, and of course especially in Africa, which they consider under their zone of influence. But there is another aspect which is very important, which we have to mention, is that today they can clearly see that in the new multipolar reality, they are losing this power of domination. This process has began reality since few years, and today they can clearly see that facing the biggest non-Western powers like China, Russia, and other countries who are not sharing the values and the views of the West, so-called values. Of course, when they see that their influence is just getting down, down, and down, of course, this is another source of big stress for them, of, I would say, not even stress, history. They are hysterical, actually, because of this. And because they can clearly see that they are losing power and domination on the world affairs in different parts of the world, including Africa, by the way, too. Of course, this makes them more aggressive, if you want, because by all means, they want to try to make back the previous world order, which was unipolar. It was a dictatorship world order. And that's why today we have to be ready for that. They are becoming more and more aggressive because, when, for example, some wild animal is injured, it doesn't make this animal not dangerous. So far, the animal is injured by alive, they will make the beast. When the beast is injured by still alive, they are becoming more and more aggressive and more dangerous because by all means, they are trying to survive. That's what the Western establishment is facing right now. And that's why we need to be ready for this reality, for this aggressivity. And but once again, when we are choosing the right approach, I'm sure we can face those dangerous actions with success. and we will make them understand that they will not succeed in their destabilization.
What do you think should other impartial media organizations, especially those in Africa, do to counter such media war from the West?
That's also a very good question. I think that the African medias today who are not sharing the views of the Western establishment, they have also to cooperate more and more. There is, for example, a very big Pan-African TV channel called Afrique Media, which I know very well because I was and I am still a lot of time invited to work to give my comments to them. I think with such medias and with your medias and other medias in Africa, I think it's important today to build some kind of coalition, alliance, based on the Pan-African integration and values. This will be, I think, the best action to take in order to counter the Western establishment interference, including in the media field. I think today the African medias and the Pan-African medias, they need to be more and more solidar. They need to have solidarity between themselves. I think this is more and more the cases, by the way, and more we will see the solidarity between independent, free Pan-African medias. I think more the West will be in a huge trouble and in big difficulties. I think this process is already started, and I think no one will be able to stop it, despite all the attacks. But I think this process needs to be more and more reinforced, and more it will be reinforced, more the success will be close and will appear as soon as possible.
And let's come to the Ethiopian people, and what should Ethiopians do to abort this dangerous mission of TPLF group, which is a terrorist group labeled as a terrorist by House of People's representatives of Ethiopia and their friends from the West? Your comments on this?
I think, I don't think I need to give so much advices for Ethiopian people, because I think the Ethiopian people have already the necessary wisdom to face any kind of interference in their internal affairs. But what I can say, of course, Ethiopian people just need to remain united. They need to not accept any kind of manipulation, which search any way to divide the Ethiopian citizens. I think the Ethiopian people have to remain united, and they have to remain mobilized, which is, I think, it's already the case. We can see that today a large majority of Ethiopian people, they are supporting the Ethiopian authorities. They are supporting the Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, and I think this is enough. They just need to remain united and mobilized against the neocolonial imperialistic agenda of the Western powers. And once again, if the Ethiopian people will remain mobilized and united, the West will never succeed to achieve its goal of destabilization or dislocation of Ethiopia. So this is basically the only thing I can say. But once again, I believe Ethiopian people has more than enough wisdom to do what is needed to be done.
Finally, any message you want to leave? Let me give you a chance.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. I think Ethiopia today, once again, is facing a very important part of its contemporary history. And I think if Ethiopia, like I said previously, will succeed to show successful resistance, which is the case so far, I think this will be a large source of inspiration for other countries in the region and in generally in Africa and other places of the world. I think today Ethiopia is a hope. This is the way I see Ethiopia's situation. I think of course, it's an issue what the West is doing and is trying to do with Ethiopia, but this is also a hope that successful resistance, which Ethiopian people and Ethiopian authorities and the Ethiopian army are showing, I think this successful resistance will be a very large source of inspiration for other nations, both in Africa and other places of the world. And I want to express my whole solidarity with Ethiopia, with Ethiopian people, with Ethiopian armed forces. I am sure that this resistance will be successful and the West will fail in its neocolonial agenda.
Mr. Mikhail Gamandiy, a journalist and an entrepreneur from Russia, thank you very much for your analysis.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Dear viewers of OBN Horn of Africa, we have discussed about Western global media pressure on Ethiopia with Mr. Mikhail Gamandiy, a journalist and an entrepreneur in Russia. This is all about our discussion for this edition. Till next edition, goodbye, take care.